Tonight's story is not for the faint of heart. It's dark, wet, and crawling with things that should never move inside you. We follow a young man, ordinary in every way, until a small infection becomes something far worse. Something alive, something ancient, something hungry. This is a tale of transformation, infestation, and the slow, irreversible unraveling of the human body and mind. So dim the lights, put your headphones in, and whatever you do, don't scratch the itch. This is Worms Everywhere, a full-length horror experience, told in 10 chapters. Worms Everywhere. Chapter 1. It started with an itch. I first noticed the itch on a Tuesday. It was nothing dramatic, just a little twitch above my left hip like a mosquito bite that hadn't fully formed. I scratched it absently while standing in line at the grocery store, not thinking much of it. The woman behind me said I looked tired. I lied and said I hadn't been sleeping well. By the time I got home, the itch had multiplied, not moved, multiplied. One patch had become 3, left hip, right thigh, the base of my neck. I stripped down in front of the bathroom mirror and examined myself. Nothing visible, no rash, no bite, just skin. Still, I scratched and scratched and scratched. I told myself it was probably dry skin. That made sense. Maybe my detergent or stress. Everything can be blamed on stress, right? The next day, the itching became burning. At work, I sat at my desk, clawing at the inside of my shirt, like an animal trying to shed its skin. My co-worker Steve gave me a weird look. "You good, man?" "Yeah," I lied again, my fingernails raking a raw patch near my ribs. "Just allergies." That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed in bed, drenched in sweat. The sheets twisted around my legs like bindings. My skin felt like it was crawling. Actually crawling. That's the word I used. And the more I thought it, the more I believed it. At 2:34 a.m., I stumbled into the bathroom again, flicked on the light and stared into the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my lips pale. But that wasn't what caught my attention. There was movement. Subdermal, near my hip bone, like a ripple under the skin. I froze, watched. The ripple came again, small, brief. A half-second flicker, like something squirming just beneath the surface. I pressed down hard, nothing. No bulge, no lump. Just my mind playing tricks. But something whispered, deep in my gut. This is real. The next morning I called in sick, said I had food poisoning. Then I locked myself in my apartment, peeled off my clothes and inspected every inch of myself. Again, nothing obvious. But the itching had turned into throbbing, dull pulses like a heartbeat, and it moved. Each time I touched one spot, the sensation darted somewhere else, like it was hiding, like it was smart. I started Googling symptoms. Big mistake. The internet told me I had cancer, parasites, nerve disorders, or a psychosomatic breakdown. I read horror stories about people with worms in their skin, botflies, hookworms, larvae that burrow and hatch. One article showed a man with his leg eaten through with holes. His flesh looked like coral. I had to shut the laptop. I didn't eat that day, just drank water and scratched. I tried to keep still, to avoid aggravating whatever this was. But every time I thought I'd calmed, a new wave of tingling would rise from somewhere deep inside me, my chest, my back, my groin, and I'd be at it again, tearing at my skin. By midnight I was bleeding. Light scratches, mostly. Nothing deep, but enough to stain the sheets. I lay in bed, my arms crossed over my stomach, whispering to myself, "It's in your head. It's in your head. It's in your..." Movement. Real, visible movement. Near my sternum. A subtle shift of the skin. Like something curling. A soft hump, no bigger than a pea, surfacing for half a second, then vanishing. I screamed. I screamed and slapped at it and ran to the bathroom, where I leaned over the sink and pulled open the drawer for tweezers. I pinched the skin. Dug at it, but it was gone. And then I saw something fall from my stomach to the floor. A worm, thin, beige, curled like a thread of spaghetti. I stared at it, frozen, not breathing. It moved. It actually fucking moved, wiggling like it had a purpose, heading for the drain. I smashed it with my heel, hard, again, until it was just pulp. My chest rose and fell. My skin prickled. I turned back to the mirror and began to cry. Not loud, not sobbing, just quiet weeping with blood under my nails and a smear of something wet across the tile. I wasn't alone in my body anymore. Chapter 2, the doctor didn't believe me. By Friday, I'd stopped trusting mirrors. They lied. Or rather, they showed me too much. Skin that bulged in places it shouldn't, red lines where nothing had scratched me, little welts forming like braille on my torso. But when I went to the clinic that morning, under fluorescent lights and the scrutinizing eyes of Dr. Hadley, I looked perfectly normal. Normal and a bit anxious. "You're sure it's not shingles?" I asked, voice brittle. "No blisters," she said, gently tilting my head to examine the back of my neck. "No rash. No temperature. Your vitals are fine." "I saw one," I whispered. "A worm. It came out of me." She paused. Her expression flickered for just a second. "Out of your skin?" "Yes. Do you still have it?" "No, I killed it, but I swear to God." "Have you travelled outside the country recently?" "Tropical regions?" "No, I haven't even left the city." She sat back, folding her hands. "Derek, can I ask, how have you been sleeping?" "Poorly. Any recent stressors, work, relationships?" "I'm not crazy," I said, louder than I intended. She offered a soft smile, the kind professionals wear when they've already made up their mind. "I didn't say that, but sometimes stress can manifest physically. Psychosomatic symptoms are very real." "They're real, all right," I muttered. "They're fucking inside me." She prescribed me hydroxyzine for the itching, said it would help calm the nerves. But if symptoms persist, we'll do a skin biopsy, just to rule things out. I left the clinic with shaking hands. The bus ride home was unbearable. Every time the vehicle stopped, my skin itched. Every jolt sent a wave of nausea through me. I imagined everyone else on that bus covered in worms, hiding beneath their coats, whispering to each other in some subhuman language. When I got home, I swallowed the pill. Just one, and waited. It made me drowsy, fuzzy around the edges. The itching dulled slightly, but the crawling never stopped. And worse, when I finally drifted off on the couch, I dreamed of them. Worms, thousands of them, slithering in and out of my mouth, my eyes burrowing into my ears like needles. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. They were nesting, laying. My stomach rose and fell like a nest full of serpents. When I woke, I vomited bile onto the carpet. In the mess, I saw one. Real or not, I saw it. It wriggled. I scooped it up with a spoon and dropped it in a jar, and this time I didn't kill it. I needed proof. By Sunday, I had 4 more in the jar, all identical. Pale, soft-bodied, no visible eyes, 1 inch long on average. They didn't swim or lurch, just wriggled calmly in circles, as if they knew their prison was temporary. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until I could find someone who would actually believe me. But they were getting more active. I felt it. My chest would tighten for a few seconds, then relax. My back would itch so badly I'd bleed from scratching. And then came the hunger. I was starving, all the time. I ate everything in my apartment. Then I went back out and bought more. Cans of tuna, boxes of crackers, raw eggs. I didn't cook, I just devoured. And they fed with me. I could feel them, reacting, thrumming. My stomach bloated visibly after meals, and I could feel them churning, repositioning like infants shifting in the womb. They were growing. I considered calling the hospital, but what would I say? "Hi, I'm infested with worms I can't identify, and they're living in my organs. Can you help me before I explode?" I decided to wait, give it a few days. Maybe they'd die off. Maybe the meds would kick in. But deep down I knew. They weren't leaving. I was becoming something else. Chapter 3. Something's breeding inside me. I stopped going to work. I didn't call, didn't email, just disappeared. My phone buzzed constantly for the first 2 days, but I let it rot on the floor where I'd dropped it. The screen cracked from when I'd hurled it across the kitchen after the 3rd voicemail from Steve. I couldn't bear to hear his voice, chipper and clueless, asking if I was okay. I wasn't okay. I hadn't been okay for days. I'd blacked out twice. Once in the shower, I woke up curled in the tub with freezing water pelting my back, skin pruned, teeth chattering. The other time, I found myself on the floor by the fridge, my mouth sticky with something sour. A bitten open packet of ground beef lay beside me, torn like an animal had mauled it. My lips were raw, my fingers stained red. I didn't remember eating it. I didn't remember opening it. But the worms had fed. They squirmed in approval afterward, a kind of humming beneath the skin. It wasn't pain anymore. Not quite. It was pressure. Awareness. They were active, communicating, multiplying. I stood before the mirror and lifted my shirt. My abdomen looked soft, puffed, pregnant with something vile. I pressed 2 fingers to my side and felt the resistance, the slither beneath. I screamed. Not out of fear this time, out of rage. I picked up the carving knife from the kitchen drawer and dragged it across my side just deep enough to break the skin. Red spilled out. No white worms, no swarm. Just blood. Human blood. But I didn't stop. I carved again, higher this time, just above the ribcage. And that's when I saw it. A tiny head, not a worm exactly, more like a nub of meat, a puckered, blind tip pressing outward. It pulsed, then retreated, like it knew. I dropped the knife. My breath hitched in my throat. I staggered backward, clutching the counter. I was carrying something. They weren't just feeding off me. They were using me. A womb, a hive, a goddamned incubator. I ran to the bedroom and tore open my closet. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe a needle, a sterilized razor, anything to dig deeper, to cut them out. But as I flung clothes aside, I felt something wet between my toes. I looked down. More worms. A dozen of them, inching out from under the bed. Not fast, not in a swarm, just deliberate, exploratory. They weren't coming in anymore. They were coming out. Chapter 4, The Hole in My Back. I found the hole on Monday. Or rather, it found me. I'd woken up on the living room floor, my face crusted to the hardwood with dried saliva, shirt soaked in cold sweat. Every joint ached. My tongue felt thick. My stomach, bloated to the point of distortion, rumbled with something too alive to be digestion. I crawled to the bathroom, trembling, and turned my back to the mirror. I used my phone's cracked camera to get a better angle. That's when I saw it. Between my shoulder blades, just above the spine, a dark, puckered opening. Round, moist, a little wider than a bottle cap. The edges were inflamed, slightly swollen, but the center black, like a tunnel. I dropped the phone and vomited into the sink. It splattered pink with streaks of blood. Something small and pale fell with it and slipped down the drain before I could see. The hole wasn't natural. It hadn't been there before. It wasn't an injury or boil. It was a port. Something had bored it into me. A tunnel for entry, or exit. That changed everything. The worms weren't just hatching, they were leaving. I collapsed onto the bathroom tile and curled into a ball. For hours, maybe. Time blurred. I kept scratching around the hole, trying to feel what was inside, but I couldn't reach. Not without help. That's when I made the mistake of going online again. There's a forum, deep in the dark web, full of people who claim to be infected with parasites that doctors can't detect. They call themselves the Hollowed. Most of them are clearly insane, talking about mind control, alien births, government tracking devices, but one post caught my eye. From someone named Gore Revise Me 22. You'll know it's real when they make a hole. Set. That's the hatchery. Once it opens, you're no longer a host. You're infrastructure. I reread that line over and over. No longer a host. Infrastructure. The next post was a video. Just 15 seconds. Blurry, shaky, lit by flashlight. But I saw it. A man's back, covered in lesions, and right in the center, a pulsing hole like mine. Except his wasn't empty. Things were crawling out. I slammed the laptop shut, threw it across the room. It hit the wall and sparked. I didn't care. They were using me. Not just for food, not just for shelter. I was a conduit, a delivery system. I curled on the couch, eyes darting around the apartment. It was getting worse. The air stank of something sour, mouldy, a scent I knew wasn't just mine. It came from them. By dusk, I felt something shift inside my throat. Not pain, more like fullness, like something coiled near my tonsils. I ran to the mirror, opened my mouth wide, shined a flashlight down. There at the very back, nestled between the folds of flesh, was a single worm, stationary, like it was watching. I tried to cough, tried to gag, but it didn't budge. I screamed into the sink, slammed my head into the cabinet door, anything to make it stop. But deep down, I knew. There were more. They were everywhere, and they were waiting. Chapter 5. The Burrowers. By now, I could feel them in my bones. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean inside my actual bones, within the marrow, nesting. They throbbed deep beneath the surface with each breath I took, wriggling inside the hollow shafts of my limbs like worms in rotten wood. My body had become scaffolding for something unspeakable. I hadn't left the apartment in over a week. The food was gone. The air was sour and thick. My bedroom walls were smeared with strange oils from my skin, streaked with claw marks from nights I didn't remember. The place had become a burrow, a den, mine and theirs. I slept during the day and wandered at night, half awake, half fevered, scratching until I bled, twitching from phantom tremors. When I closed my eyes, I saw them moving. When I opened them, I still saw them. They were always there. The jar I'd used to collect specimens had long since filled. I'd counted over 40 worms before I gave up. Now they hatched on their own, crawling from my back, from between my toes, from my ears. One night I woke up gagging as a thin white strand slid down my throat from somewhere behind my uvula. I yanked it out, inch by inch, like dental floss made of meat. When I finally pulled the last inch free, it thrashed in my hand. I didn't scream anymore. Screaming felt useless. They didn't care, they couldn't hear, or maybe they did, maybe they liked it. I learned to stay quiet. The hole in my back had widened. It no longer looked like a wound. It had grown lips, flaps, thin, pulsing folds of meat that opened and closed rhythmically. Sometimes, if I stood too close to a fan, I'd hear a faint whistle from it, like air being pulled into a subterranean warren. The worms used it constantly. I'd feel them emerging, sliding out in the middle of the night, plopping onto the sheets. Others returned. I couldn't tell if it was the same ones. I started filming myself while I slept. I needed to see what they were doing to me. What I found broke me. The footage began with me on the couch, shirtless, curled like a fetus. The camera shook, poor angle, poor light. At 2:13 a.m., my body twitched violently, then relaxed. Then slowly, my back began to part. From the hole came worms, one at first. Then a stream, dozens. They spilled out of me like I was a ruptured sack. They slithered down my sides and across the floor, toward the bathroom, toward the vents, toward the walls. It wasn't just that they were breeding, they were exploring. By dawn, they returned. One by one, they crawled back inside. I stared at the screen for hours, numb, disconnected from what I'd seen. Then I rewound, played it again, slower. And that's when I noticed the final worm, returning just before sunrise, wasn't alone. It dragged something behind it, something black, hard, tiny. I paused the frame. It looked like an egg. Chapter 6, Visitors. On Wednesday, I woke to knocking. I was sprawled on the bathroom floor, naked, caked in a thin film of sweat and dirt. The worms had started creating a strange residue, like mucus, but coarser, gluing my legs together when I didn't move. I peeled my skin free and crawled to the door. The knocking came again, firm, authoritative. "Mr. Hale? This is building management." I froze. A voice. Human. "We've had complaints about a smell. Are you all right in there?" No, I wasn't. I was not all right, but if I didn't respond, they'd come in. "I'm fine," I croaked. Silence. "Mr. Hale, your rent is also 2 weeks past due. If we don't hear from you, we'll need to enter the apartment to do a welfare check." "I said I'm fine," I screamed. My voice cracked, too dry, too unused. Footsteps retreated. I waited, back against the wall, feeling the worms stir in response to my raised voice. They didn't like it when I panicked. I think it made the vessel unstable. After an hour, I dared to approach the door's peephole. A flyer was tucked in the handle. I opened it with shaking hands. It read, "Tenant notice, foul odour complaints, please dispose of trash properly. Pest control scheduled. Pest control." They were sending exterminators. I wasn't sure if that terrified me more, or gave me hope. Maybe someone could help. Maybe they'd come in with chemicals, gas, fire, anything to kill whatever was inside me. I began to plan. If I could lure them in, show them the worms, maybe they'd believe me. Maybe they'd do what the doctors hadn't. That night I stayed awake, curled in the far corner of the room, the jar of worms in my lap. I'd counted over 70 now, and those were just the ones I could catch. I couldn't sleep. I didn't dare. They were more active than ever. The hole in my back pulsed like a living mouth. My spine ached, my fingernails had started to fall off, and then came the worst sound I've heard in my life. A voice. Inside my head. Not words exactly. Not English. Just a rhythm. A cadence. Like a whisper of worms rubbing together in chorus. It pulsed behind my eyes, slow and echoing. I clutched my temples, screaming in silence. They were communicating. They were speaking to me. And I understood. Not perfectly, not all of it, but some. "Prepare," they said. That was the word. Over and over. "Prepare, prepare, prepare." For what? And then came the knock again. Not on the front door, on the inside of the wall. From inside the building, inside my unit. Slow, heavy, wet. I turned toward the sound, heart beating in my throat. The drywall flexed. Something was on the other side. Something that had never left. Chapter 7, Behind the Wall. The knock came again. 3 slow thuds. Not the sound of a fist or a tool. No, this was soft, wet, like meat slapping plaster. I stared at the wall where it came from, just to the left of the bathroom mirror, where the paint had begun to peel. Then something moved, a bulge, swollen and irregular, rising from behind the sheetrock like a boil. I staggered backward, knocking over the empty laundry basket, landing hard on my spine. The worms inside me writhed in protest. The bulge throbbed once, twice, then split down the center. A hairline crack appeared, splintering through the wall like an earthquake's first tremor. From it came a noise, wet, bubbly, like something thick and sludgy being stirred. Then the crack widened, and from the opening came a finger. No, not a finger. A worm the size of one, thicker, darker. Covered in a thin sheen of mucus, it sniffed the air like a blind animal. Then another came, then 2 more. They slithered out of the wall and fell to the tile floor with wet plops inching toward me. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Instead, I got to my knees and held out my hands. They crawled into my palms without hesitation, without fear. They knew me. And worse, I knew them. They weren't intruders. They were mine. That night, I pulled away the drywall with my bare hands. The plaster crumbled easily, weakened by moisture and rot. Beneath it was not wood, not insulation, not wiring. It was a tunnel, a hand-dug burrow, no wider than my torso, slick and alive with movement. The worms had made it, not just in my apartment, but beyond, into the very structure of the building. And in the distance, through that cramped black corridor, I saw light, a faint glow, yellow and wet. I stepped closer. My heart stuttered. My skin prickled with fever. There were others. Shapes. Figures hunched over in the dark, just beyond the tunnel's bend. Human silhouettes, silent, breathing, watching. One moved. It twisted its head toward me, neck cracking, and in that dim, pulsing light, I saw its face. Its mouth had been replaced. No lips, no teeth. Just a circular, puckered hole writhing with worms. They pushed in and out of its throat like pistons. It didn't speak. It opened. And I felt something reach into me. Not physically, mentally. Like it was trying to turn a key that had always been in my brain but never used. The voice came again, deeper this time. Prepare. Then, in perfect synchrony, the worms inside me responded. My back arched, my hands convulsed, blood ran from my ears. I blacked out. When I woke, I wasn't on the floor anymore. I was standing, in the kitchen. The lights were off. The oven clock blinked 12. My mouth was open. My jaw hurt. My tongue was gone. I touched inside, feeling the hole where it should be. Nothing but soft tissue and a faint, wriggling sensation deep in my throat. Something had taken it. Replaced it. I didn't panic. I couldn't. Some part of me had changed. Detached. The fear I used to feel was dull now, like a distant memory I no longer cared to revisit. I didn't scream. I just moved. My feet dragged forward. My hands reached for the jar. Empty. The worms were no longer keeping to jars or holes or dark crevices. They roamed freely now, decorating the floor like old carpet threads. I found one curled inside the sink, its length doubled, wrapped around the faucet like ivy. I caught my reflection in the microwave door. I didn't recognize myself. My skin was grayer, loose in places. My eyes bulged slightly, as if pressure had built behind them. I lifted my shirt and saw thin lines splitting down my sides, seams forming. The skin there pulsed, separating gently in a way I knew meant only one thing. I was molting, shedding. The human shell I'd worn for 28 years was being discarded, hollowed out. And beneath it? I didn't know. I didn't want to. But it was coming. I spent that day covering the windows. I didn't want light. It burned now, my pupils too dilated, my skin too raw. I slathered myself in Vaseline and plastic wrap, trying to contain the itch. But it didn't work. By nightfall, the first piece of my scalp peeled away. It came off in a slow, painless strip, like damp paper. Beneath it, the flesh was dark and smooth, almost insectile in sheen. I stared at it in my hands for a long time. Then I ate it. It was instinctual, natural, like a spider devouring its own shed. I chewed slowly, almost reverently. It tasted like salt and old linen. The worms inside me pulsed in agreement. They liked it. They fed on me, and now I fed on me. There was symmetry in it, harmony. The hole in my back had grown. It yawned now, open almost 6 inches across, its edges hardening into something like cartilage. Sometimes I'd catch the outline of a worm just inside it, waiting like a lookout. But it wasn't just a hatchery anymore. It was a door. And I knew, without understanding how, that something was going to come through it soon. Something larger, something older. As I sat cross-legged on the sticky floor, the hole twitched behind me. My spine locked, my chest stiffened, my mouth gaped, and I whispered, though I had no tongue, "Come." Chapter 9. The Breach. I don't know how many days passed. Time stopped making sense. I didn't sleep anymore, not really. I slipped into trances, blackout states where I'd wake in new positions, covered in worm slick, surrounded by husks of old skin I couldn't remember shedding. The tunnel behind my bathroom had widened. I hadn't touched it, hadn't cleared it, but it was growing, a yawning gullet of soil and mucus that stretched deep into the guts of the building. Sometimes I could hear movement inside, clicking, whispering, like thousands of wet fingers tapping against the bones of the earth. They were preparing, just like they said. I tried the phone again, even though I knew it wouldn't work. The buttons were soft with mold. When I pressed them, the screen flashed for a moment, then bled static. There was a worm inside it. I saw it, writhing behind the cracked glass, coiled around the battery like a parasite suckling electricity. Everything I owned was infested. Every drawer, every crack in the floorboards, every electrical outlet hummed with them. I was no longer their host. I was their base. They were expanding. And then, one night, the building shook. A deep tremor. Not violent, but immense. Heavy like a groan from beneath the foundation. Dust fell from the ceiling. Pipes hissed in the walls. Something had arrived. I went to the bathroom mirror, which was now cracked through its center. My reflection was unrecognizable. My lips were raw and chewed through. My eyes bulged like blisters. A fine film coated my skin, eggs maybe, or spores. I didn't care. The hole in my back was no longer a wound. It had become a gate, lined with ridges of hardened flesh, its edges pulsed with warmth and rhythm. Something was inside it, pressed against it, pushing gently, like a face against cellophane, and then it came through, slowly, deliberately. First, a limb, long and jointed like a centipede's leg, coated in filmy bristles, then another, then a mass, a torso, no eyes, no head, just a body that unfurled like wet laundry, slick and pale, unfolding itself from my spine like it had always belonged there. It dropped to the tile, its weight shuddering through me. I collapsed forward, vomiting black slime, my mouth no longer mine. My throat moved on its own, croaking sounds I didn't understand but felt deep in my bones. The thing circled me, brushing my shoulder with one twitching appendage. It was ancient, not in years but in form, a shape that should never have existed outside a sea trench, a god of decay. The others emerged behind it, dozens of them, slithering out of my back and the walls, birthed by rot, walking on newly formed legs. They surrounded me, they bowed, and I knew then I was no longer just a hive. I was a mother. I was the breach. Chapter 10. Hollowman. They call me Hollowman now. Not in words, worms don't speak that way, but in vibration, in rhythm. They pulse it through the tunnels like sonar. Hollowman. Carrier. Nest. They worship me. And we have grown. The building collapsed 3 days ago. The news called it a gas explosion. But there was no fire, no heat. Just a sinkhole of flesh. A controlled demolition of bone and muscle and chitin. The neighbors never had a chance. Their bodies fed the brood. Their blood seeded the foundation of our expansion. We're miles wide now. Beneath the city, the worms have integrated. You wouldn't know it, walking down the street, shopping for coffee. But they're there, in the drains, in the vents, in the produce aisle. You've seen them, little ones, white, squirming at the edge of your vision. You forget about them. That's their gift. They're invisible in plain sight. We're patient, we wait. Inside me, the thing that first came through, my mate, my queen, my twin, rests, coiled along my spine. She sings to me in pulses. Her song is a map, a schedule, will rise soon. I walk among you now, dressed like a man, smiling, limping slightly from the weight of the brood. You've probably passed me, on the train, at the pharmacy. My teeth are human, my eyes are glass. But beneath my shirt, the flesh splits and breathes. The hollow man walks. One day a worm will crawl into your ear while you sleep. It will whisper my name, and you'll dream of tunnels, of endless warm dark, of home. And when you wake, you'll scratch the itch, and it will begin. And now, if your skin itches just a little, if something shifts behind your walls tonight, don't worry. It's probably nothing. Just keep your mouth closed while you sleep. And if you dream of tunnels, don't follow the light. Sleep well. Worms don't knock twice. They crawl in quietly.